This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you in partnership with Tesco.
I thought it was great. It was very therapeutic. It's almost trance-inducing as you're, cutting through all of the weeds. It felt like I'd done, a decent job. I'd have liked to have stayed on for much longer.
Not Liz Truss talking about her 45 days as Prime Minister. It's Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch after driving a combine harvester in Essex. With an exclusive interview, we meet the Yorkshire dairy farmer who's starting a renewable energy company and powering up the local community, and we take an in-depth look at autumn weed control. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh. Broom.
Straight to our top story. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch visited an Essex farm this week, meeting farmers to talk about inheritance tax. First, though, she jumped on a combine harvester courtesy of Sam Goddard at Hall Farm, Little Walden. I caught up with Kemi Badenoch straight after and I asked her how she got on combining wheat.
I thought it was great. It was very therapeutic. It's almost trance-inducing as you're, cutting through all of the weeds. It felt like I'd done, a decent job. I'd have liked to have stayed on for much longer.
Other than a photo opportunity, what do events like this actually achieve?
It's a way for us to tell a story about what's happening to farming in our country. I could stand at the dispatch box every day and talk about it, but it's actually getting out, talking to farmers, finding out what their concerns are, telling them what we're doing, but telling the story of the problems they're experiencing to the rest of the community and the rest of the country. Right now, the Conservative Party is backing farmers fully. We've said that we want to, scrap Labour's family farms tax, but the average person out there, even in rural communities like mine, don't really understand what's going on. I need to make sure that they do understand.
And you're not exactly in a position of power as the opposition. You've said that you'll reverse the inheritance tax at the first opportunity, but what are you doing to hold the government's feet to the fire in reality?
So forcing them to vote. Forcing Labour to vote on this issue means that people can actually see what they're doing, not just what they're saying. It's very easy to have sound bites and say we support farmers, but if your farmer constituents can see that you're actually voting to create problems for them, it raises awareness. At the end of the day, the people who have the real power are the voters. But that time comes only once every few years. And what we need is at the next election for people to understand that the Conservative Party is the only one that truly backs farming.
The government's not shown any sign of budging until now, but do you see a U-turn on the cards, or is this more a case of finessing the policy to make it actually achieve what the government says it wants to achieve?
I thought that they were going to finesse the policy. Now I'm not sure they will even do that. They've U-turned on their winter fuel payment. They've U-turned on the welfare cuts, which they were supposed to make. I suspect that they're now worried that they've got no money from anywhere else. I don't think they're going to U-turn on this. I want them to U-turn. I have asked them to U-turn. We will scrap this tax. But the fundamental issue is that Labour don't understand farming or rural communities. I talked about how my understanding of farming has come from being an MP in this area for a long time. I've read the letters, I've had the meetings, I know all the difficulties people have had with the rural payment scheme and the basic payment system and so on. Most Labour MPs are, metropolitan, urban. They just don't get rural communities. We do.
Some of our podcast listeners will say, well, that's very true, but you didn't exactly cover yourself in glory when you were in government. I'm thinking about the Australian trade deal, former DEFRA Secretary George Eustice saying that you gave away too much in return for too little.
Well, I wasn't Trade Secretary at the time, but I'm in charge now. That's the difference. What my predecessors did is not my record. The record I have was signing the biggest trade deal that we did with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, countries like Canada, Mexico, and what happened? The NFU praised it and said, this is a good deal. I know how to get things done. You need to have a level playing field. There is no point putting all sorts of rules on our farmers here, all sorts of regulations. You can't use neonics, you can't farm this way, you can't touch this land, and then allowing other countries who don't have all those regulations to compete. It's not a level playing field, and it's not fair. That's one of the things that we want to change.
And going back to inheritance tax again, you've met farmers here today, farmers like Sam Goddard, whose combine you've been driving. What should farmers be doing? What should the farming sector be doing to get the message across to government? We've had protests, we've had the softly approach. What more can we do?
What I would like to see is farmers talking more to their local communities and also to their supply chains. Supermarkets, the people who supply, the machinery, everybody within the supply chain needs to get involved with this campaign. It's a big shame, but one of the worst things I hear when I'm talking about this issue is hearing back, farmers are very wealthy, why don't they just pay tax like everyone else? A lot of people in our country, both rural and urban, don't understand that farmers may have a lot of assets, but they don't have a lot of income. And if you start taxing them at this rate, you force them to sell their assets, which means that they cannot make any money. And the awareness raising really, really needs to happen. I get it. I have, a rural constituency. I've spoken to farmers. I had a grandfather who, bought a farm in later life. His children didn't want a farm, neither did I. I know that you really need to create incentives for the next generation. If you're putting inheritance tax up and making it crippling the way Labour has done, we're not going to have farming in the next generation.
Kemi Badenoch, thank you for talking to the Farmers Weekly podcast.
Thank you, Johann.
Now, I also caught up with host farmer Sam Goddard and asked him why he invited Kemi Badenoch to his farm.
Just because I felt like Kemi is still pushing to get the changes that we want, so we thought we'd do the best we can to help her, really. She's keen to speak to us, so happy to help.
And what are you growing here? You said milling wheat?
No, it's not actually. It's all feed wheat. Yeah, it's all feed wheat around here. Yeah, so supply into various feed mills, but also perhaps the Weetabix a little bit sometimes as a hard biscuit wheats. Yeah.
And harvest, how's it going?
Okay, fine. Bit stop-start. Yeah, the yields aren't great. But the heavier fields are fine, average. Other bits, some of the second wheats are a bit poor, but we expect about a drought, haven't we? So.
And other than the photo opportunity, I mean, you feel it's really important to engage like this?
Yes, I do. I think Kemi really is trying to listen, and like she says, she would like to see the change. She would like to see it reversed. So I think she is genuinely pushing for that. So I think it's just a case of helping her as much as we possibly can to get that change. Whether it happens or not, I don't know, but we have to try.
And how will it affect your family business?
It'll have a big impact. It's already having an impact in the sense that we're already incurring costs investigating what the damage will be. So, it's already costing us money. It could potentially be catastrophic, for the business over 1 or 2 generations. So,
and what sort of generation are you?
So on this farm 4, so father's here, grandfather and great-grandfather, we all understood that farming doesn't make a great deal of money. It's not a big cash industry, but it is a long-term business. We always felt like it's a multi-generation endeavour, and now that's been put at risk. So one more straw, break the camel's back.
That's Essex farmer Sam Goddard, and before him, of course, Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch. Hugh, Kemi in a combine, thoughts?
Kemi on a combine, doing a good job by the sounds of things. Love how she found it therapeutic. I'm sure some people on a wet, dismal, dewy evening might say it's anything but therapeutic. But when it's running well, it can be therapeutic. Look, it's good that they're keeping this in the public domain, that they're talking about it. It picked up a bit of press traction, didn't it? The front of the Express the other day was talking about how the government wants to sort of ransack the countryside, etc. But yeah, in reality, though, we are 40 some odd months away from a general election. And there's not really much. I mean, she could say anything, couldn't she, quite frankly?
And Louise, what was your take on it?
Well, I think it's good that they are recognising that this issue is still causing farmers a lot of grief, and that rural communities in general are really not very happy with the way that things are going. So that's helpful, I'm sure. The Tories have committed already that they will scrap this inheritance tax deal. If it does go through, they're going to scrap it. So we need to make sure that we hold them to that if and when they are next back in power. I don't know what's going to happen with this issue over the next couple of years. I'm really not sure at all. I think there is still a great deal of opposition to it. So Getting Kemi involved is a good thing. We obviously need to get as many people involved as possible. And she made the point to you, didn't she, Johann, that the supply chain needs to come in on this now. And I do agree with that. I think that's really important. They need to explain that they're going to struggle to feed the country and meet all their commitments if farmers aren't able to make the decisions that they need them to make.
Hugh, Louise is right, isn't she? As you've said, the Tories could be as much as 4 years away from being in government.
Yeah, they are. And I say there's the stuff they can do. I mean, one thing that, back in January when we were at Lama, we spoke to Victoria Aitken and we talked about the whole inheritance tax thing. And obviously they're quick to come out and say, oh, we'd scrap it instantly, da, 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 da. And I made the point, and I continually make the point, this is an issue for farming. We know that. And everyone at every stage, it just seems to keep missing it. So the one thing, it's great that she's bringing it out there, but if they really want to push it, start to spin it into the other sector type argument as well, because then it might have more resonance with voters. Because most voters don't get it. They still don't get it, despite all the lobbying that's done. I think the politicians get it more. But the voters don't, because they just can't get their head around the whole thing. Look, the thing to watch here as well, whilst it's great that she's out on farm, it's great that she's engaging, it's great that they're supporting farming, it's back to the reform thing. The thing really to watch is Wales next year. That will have more impact potentially on policy going forward. If there was a utter routing in Wales next spring, then you might find that you've got a Labour administration that's perhaps slightly going to have to just purely out of survival reposition. They either get stuck in and become dogmatic and say, we're going to be dead in 3 years anyway, so what's the point? Or they start to manoeuvre slightly. And at the moment, looking at the polling on the reform side, which is far, far greater for lots of reasons than the Tory side, that's really the one to watch in terms of what goes where. And it was interesting as well. I was talking to a former colleague in London at Leaving Do last week who'd been to a thing of government ministers, and he was chatting with some of the government ministers, and all they were talking about was who was in what camp come the Labour leadership contest, which they see on the horizon next summer after reform rout them in Wales. So they're already sort of capitulating in behind closed doors, as opposed to actually coming up with any positive structure or strategy going forward. But it's an interesting one. But look, great that, as ever, aside all of what's going on, it is great that our politicians are on farm, highlighting the importance of farming and trying to get their head around strategy and trying to get their head around delivering some sort of policy within their own context.
So this is the idea then that Labour are so unpopular that they could be trounced by Reform and Nigel Farage in the Welsh Senedd elections next year, and Keir Starmer could face a leadership challenge. Louise, I was also struck by Kemi Badenoch suggesting that this is not just a town v country issue, that farmers need to be explaining it to non-farmers in the countryside, that their neighbours effectively don't understand the impact that inheritance tax is going to have on farmers, including the ripple effects.
Well, I think that's I do agree with that, but I think that also, of course, depends on what the people who live in those rural communities do for a living. Because, as we all know, if farming is going to be given a hit, and let's face it, it is taking a hit at the moment, then a lot of other people's jobs are on the line too. So it's something that really does affect rural communities, and it's something that I think people are very aware of. I mean, we're hearing, aren't we, every week about redundancies and restructuring of companies trying to take account of what's happening. We know, don't we, that investment on farm just isn't happening. It's all just sort of waiting and seeing what's going to happen. So there is going to be an effect on those rural communities and quite a lot of the people that live in them. And I think that's something that, she's right, that does need to be exploited. I'm fairly sure that that those people do understand what it means to farmers. A lot of them know a farmer and they know how affected they're going to be. So, that would be my take on it, really.
Not just agricultural property relief then, Hugh, business property relief too.
Yeah, it is. Like I say, it's across the spectrum of sectors. It's across the spectrum of lots of other businesses and business types. Louise is absolutely right. There'll be people that work with farmers that are linked to farming communities that get it, but they're still a tiny, tiny amount of the electorate. If you look at the CLA Powerhouse data from a couple of years ago, what is it? Farming covers 80-90% of the countryside, but in terms of actual turnover in the rural economy, it's not even 4%. So therefore, by default, the people that are actually linked to it are a very, very tiny minority, as indeed, as farmers, we are a tiny minority in an island of 60 odd million people. So look, the battle continues. We just need to keep talking about it, keep raising awareness, keep highlighting the impact it will have, in the hope that something changes somewhere down the line, and either the government changes its tack. At the moment, that doesn't look likely. Yes, Kemi's doing the right thing. She's talking about pushing the government so they actually have a vote on this particular policy change, on this Treasury piece in the new session of Parliament, when they go back in September after the recess, rather. At least you can nail it to the wall and say, well, your MP voted for it and you voted against it. And we know still there are 108, 110 odd Labour MPs that at the moment, regardless of the IHT thing, just what's going on politically at the moment, are staring one-term wonder in the face and won't be an MP in 5 years' time. So we've got to keep putting pressure on those guys as well.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And now a sponsored interview with this week's podcast partner, Tesco. And I'm joined by Natalie Smith, Head of Sustainable Agriculture and Fisheries at Tesco, to talk about Tesco's Green Print for UK Farming Report and low carbon concept farms. Natalie, these low carbon concept farms, what sort of innovative things are they trialling?
So it's a wide range of innovations and farming practices that are being trialled on the farm. So this could range from the use of cutting edge technology to alternative fertilizers, but also just around those sustainable farming techniques which can support in terms of protecting and restoring nature and biodiversity.
That's going to appeal to a lot of our listeners. Can you give one or two examples, maybe one livestock, one arable?
Yeah, so from a produce arable perspective, an area that we've been focused on for a couple of years now has been around alternatives to conventional fertilizers, so low carbon fertilizers. There's one technology that we're trying on the produce low carbon concept farm, which is called RLeaf. And actually that is a foliar spray, and it actually helps to break down nitrous oxide and actually, without getting too techy, suck nitrous oxide into the plant to be able to use that to feed nitrogen to the plant. So really exciting technology from a produce and arable perspective. On the livestock side, we're still in the process of establishing that farm and working through what those priority areas are. But a key one for us will very much be around animal health and welfare, productivity and efficiency, and the opportunity of the use of genetics. So how we can reduce the number of days to slaughter by high genetic sires, which naturally reduces carbon footprint.
So some people listening to this might say, oh, this all sounds a bit techie whizzy and maybe expensive, but this is not all about expensive technology, is it?
No, we've been quite careful in ensuring, as part of these low carbon concept farms, that they're not, all singing, all dancing, new farms, new technology, which is not scalable. They're good standard UK farms where we're able to show that this is something that is replicable and scalable across the total farm supply chain. So we're obviously going to be trialling stuff that is not appropriate for everyone, as everyone's farm is slightly different, but hopefully you'll be able to see that this is, a standard good practice farm that you will be able to take back to your own business and use some of that information and knowledge that we've learnt.
And you're working with, across the supply chain on this, aren't you?
We are. I think that's the really exciting part about the concept farm for our produce and arable supply chains, because sort of for the first time for us, we're working collaboratively across a number of suppliers and a number of crops. So that includes our potato suppliers, Branston. We're also working with Greenyard, Haygates and TH Clements. So it's across, our wheat crops, broccoli and also peas as well. So that's really exciting for us.
Natalie Smith, Head of Sustainable Agriculture and Fisheries at Tesco, this week's Farmers Weekly podcast partner. Thank you very much.
The Farmers Weekly podcast.
Now, a Yorkshire dairy farmer has been overwhelmed by donations as he seeks to raise £50,000 to set up a community-owned renewable energy company. Eddie Andrew, who makes ice cream under his own Our Cow Molly brand on the edge of Sheffield, says the money will be match funded by insurance giant Aviva. Eddie says generating his own energy will help the dairy unit go completely off-grid and be a win-win for the family farm and the local community.
The way that we're at now is we've got about just short of another 30 days where Aviva will match fund any donations we get given. And that money is going to go to set up the legal structure of what's ultimately going to be called the Sheffield Energy Company, which will be able to go out to people and say, if you put money into this, then you're buying a share in the Sheffield Energy Company. And Our Cow Molly dairy will buy all the electricity it produces. So you've got a guaranteed customer for all the electricity supplied. And I was expecting people to donate £1 or a fiver. There's been people donating £100, £250 each. I've been totally blown away by people's generosity. And the people that I've spoke to genuinely believe that actually, why can't we have a community energy company?
So they're doing it not just because it's a good rate of return, but they're doing it for the right reasons, because it's going to be a community-owned enterprise, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose people have, we've gone through the energy crisis and people realise just how vulnerable we are to outside companies. And this gives the opportunity to actually the people be the energy supplier for the farmer they know.
And how's it work with Aviva, Eddie?
Aviva have like a holding page so that you set up your kind of funding thing on their page, and then whatever you get at the end of it, they will match fund 50% of it up to £50,000. So if we get £50,000 raised, they'll give another 50,000. I don't think we'll get as much as that, but
it's still helping you, though, Eddie, secure a sustainable future for your farm business, right?
Well, it helps us just kickstart all the legal stuff and set up the company. When the community energy company's set up, then you can go out selling shares and you've got something people can really invest in. So this Aviva thing is really just the catalyst of us getting going.
Ultimately, Eddie, what are you trying to achieve here?
Farming without fossil fuels. That's the ultimate aim. And we're going to produce enough renewable energy on site that we will be totally off grid as phase one. So that is 1.5 megawatt of solar on the barn roof, and then a 33 kilowatt anaerobic digester. So that's the starting point. That will then take the farm completely off grid. When the farm starts buying that electricity and the money starts to go into the community energy bank, then we will be then looking at phase two, which will be a couple of small wind turbines and then a hydrogen electrolyzer. So then we will be able to store all the excess electricity the farm can't use as green hydrogen. And so it'll split water up and give us green hydrogen and medical grade liquid oxygen. And being 4 miles from Sheffield city centre and massive hospitals that all use oxygen all day long, the scope right on our doorstep to use both of those. In the future, I imagine the construction in Sheffield's clean air zone will be pushing towards hydrogen powered JCB construction equipment. So then they'll need hydrogen fuel. So it's kind of very much saying that phase one is get the farm off grid. Phase two is start to make a difference to other people.
So for some people, farming on the urban fringe involves huge challenges, but what you're showing, Eddie, is that it can have huge advantages too.
Yeah, I mean, there's two advantages. One, that you've got people that need electricity right on your doorstep. I mean, in Derbyshire, next door to us, there's a hydrogen bus, and it drives past the farm to go into the city centre to refuel. I think we've got one hydrogen petrol pump in Sheffield. So it's a little bit like, the chicken and the egg thing. You've got to have the infrastructure. You need it being produced. And the other thing we benefit from, people just come up out of the city centre into the countryside to have an ice cream. So yeah, so we we're situated in just a perfect spot.
And for people who want to find out more about what you're doing,
I think if they just Googled our cow molly, our homepage, there's all the information on that they can kind of find it easy enough. But we've been putting out on X and on our Facebook page and everything, the link to it if anybody wants to kind of get involved. But what we're trying to show really is that if a farm wants to do a green energy project, it actually could raise the money from its community right on its doorstep and kind of tie the farmers and the community a bit closer together, because at the end of the day, we're producing food to feed people on our doorstep. So if they help us produce energy as well, everybody wins.
Sheffield dairy farmer and ice cream maker Eddie Andrew, soon to be running a community-owned renewable energy company. Louise, a great way to raise money using an alternative funding stream to get an innovative farm project off the ground.
Yeah, and this really is an innovative project, isn't it? They're decarbonising this farm and they're wanting to add green energy, green fuel for the farm. So, one way of doing that is to see what money you can raise out there, which is absolutely what they're doing. I'm sure that he has explored all the grant funding opportunities and similar available to him. And this is obviously a route that is worth pursuing. So off they go. Wish them lots and lots of luck with this. I think I'm right in saying that their target is £50,000, and they've spelt out quite clearly how that money is going to be spent and what they're going to do with it. So they're up and running. Let's hope they get the money that they need.
The other thing I like about this, Hugh, is that Ed is working together with the local community there on the edge of Sheffield, on the urban fringe, and that's really inspiring.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's absolutely the right thing to do, isn't it? And in terms, he's done that with his business anyway. In terms of how he's diversified his milk outlet and what he does with his milk stuff. But equally, at the same time, he is looking beyond that and trying to offset some of those challenges. There are plenty of challenges. I can tell you from personal experience working and farming in the urban fringe. So yeah, he's doing absolutely the right thing.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're up before sunrise during the busiest time of year and still on your feet 12 hours later. The V12 Cotswold dealer boot is made for days like this, built for comfort, safety and strength to handle whatever the day throws at you. They've been independently tested by Sartre against the market-leading boot, proving they're not only the toughest, but outperforming the competition in long-lasting durability as well. No gimmicks, just boots that do their job, so you can do yours. Now that's fair dinkum. Use the code podcast20 for 20% off your first order. Visit v12footwear.com to place your order now. The V12 Cotswold gets tougher with age.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly Podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can also message us by texting the word farm followed by your message to 88440. Hugh, what have you been up to this week?
What have I been up to this week? Oh yeah, big success with so I was talking about solar. I've been trying to get an electric cable down a duct, which pulling cables, well, that sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? Pulling cables is always harder than you think. It looks easy on the surface. And I bought this cable years ago. It was on a deal at the time. And I thought, oh, hang on, they're selling that off. I'll have that. And it's sat in a shed for ages. I'm happy to say that it's now in the ground, about to do sterling work. But oh my word, trying to get it through the duct, it was only about 60 odd meter cable run, and it's a 35mm cable. It's quite big. It was some serious work. It was like a tricky carving, and finally it came through. But yes, that was the highlight of the week, actually getting the cable through. Other than that, what else have we been doing? Just doing the usual stuff, weighing cows, feeding calves, collecting calves. All steady stuff really. And the weather's it's just starting to get a little bit dry again, I think, but the rain has helped. And actually, we've been cultivating ahead of some grass. And actually, it's quite surprising how much moisture is actually in the soil now. Much better than it was certainly a month or two ago. With any luck, when we drill the grass imminently, knowing my luck, and I apologise to everyone in advance, it probably won't then rain for 2 months. But let's hope that's not the case and we do get some rain.
And how are things with you, Louise? I mean, we've heard in the audio with Kemi Badenoch, Essex farmer Sam Goddard saying harvest's not going too badly. A bit stop-start for Sam, but full steam ahead where you are in Bedfordshire, yeah?
Yes, harvest is continuing at pace. Well, it certainly is around here anyway. I was out just watching the combine working here last night. So, I think much the same as we've already said about harvest. Some people are pleasantly surprised. They weren't expecting much, and they're getting more than they thought they were going to. Maybe not as much as they would like to have achieved, but there you go. So, pleasantly surprised. It's easy in terms of they are cracking on with it. We are already seeing cover crops and oilseed rape going into the ground, next year's crops. So all that is happening. I think they must be quite pleased with the rate of progress, really.
Hugh, straw a big issue though for you livestock boys?
Yeah, at the moment, that's the one thing. As Louise says, there's some golden pots in places of where people are pleasantly surprised with some grain yields and with the oilseed rape yields, although there's some pretty horrific ones as well. It should be pointed out. It's not all sweetness and light. But I think the one big thing is even where grain has surprised. I was talking to someone last week who's cutting a load of spring barley in Norfolk, and they were surprised how well it yielded given the lack of rain. But as he said, it was heartbreaking. We know everyone wants the straw, but he said there was so little straw, it wasn't even worth, he said we just chopped it because it was so pathetic. The time we'd raked it into a row worthy of a baler, it still was pretty pathetic. And you'd have so much stone in it that you'd sort of, block the baler up with stone. So straw is a big issue, but there are still some hot spots. I drove over Salisbury Plain this week and they were combining, and oh my god, amazing straw on a wheat crop there. I was like, wow. Having been down the 303 in Hampshire where it was a bit thinner, top of Salisbury's Plain, it's absolutely banging. So yeah, variability is the word, but straw is the concern.
Hence the buoyant straw prices we're seeing. Hugh, what are the rest of the markets doing?
Thank you very much, Johann. Finished their deadweight this week, 642.4. That's up about 1.1 pence on the week. So that's slowly edging up. Live weight average also goes up about 3p, 364.5. To the sheep rings, 755.6 is the SQQ deadweight for sheep. That's up a penny on the week. So those just continuing to firm all the time, those sheep prices. And indeed, in the live ring, we're seeing it go up another 2p, 347.2. Pig price has dropped back 0.2 of a penny, 207.8. And then to the arable markets, and I'm afraid it's another fairly, not particularly cheery picture. Feed wheat, 162.8 is the spot this week. That has gone back just under £1. Milling wheat, 186.6 spot. That goes back exactly £3. Feed barley, 142.20. That drops back about 90p on the week. Oilseed rape, 392.7. That has dropped back around about 50p on the week. Feed peas, 211.80. That's actually gone up about 10 quid. So some cheer there if you're growing feed peas. Feed beans, 212.80. 8.3. That has gone up £1 on the week. Red diesel this week has actually dropped back just about a penny. You should be paying, according to the Wednesday morning ring round, around 68.2 pence per litre.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Want to get the most out of your on-farm AD plant? Unlock its full potential with Amor. Amor run their own AD so they know what works and how to help you. Their lab offers fast, insightful testing alongside valuable advice to keep your digester stable and productive. From biological management to rapid feedstock analysis, Amor has got you covered. For more details, email amor@abagri.com. That's AMUR at abagri.com. Let's get your AD running at its best.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, with harvest well underway and indeed finished on some farms already, thoughts are well and truly on getting the next crop in the ground. Good winter crop establishment requires good autumn weed control, so what's the best way to go about it? Well, there's a new grassweed herbicide out this autumn, Fundatis from FMC. We'll talk about that in a moment. First, though, we caught up with wheat scientist Richard Hull from Rothamsted Research, and I started by asking Richard about integrated crop management.
This time of year, or the time between harvest and drilling or just after drilling, is probably the most important time we have for UK farmers to get on top of grass weeds control. And that's partly because there's a shift in focus of where we use herbicides now, I would say, within the rotation, the lack of sort of post-stem control. So it really is the most important time of year. And I think there's probably several factors that you need to think about to sort of form a tactic and a strategy going into sort of that time, that sort of post-harvest and then just after drilling. And I think the first one is really to know what your enemy is. It seems really obvious, but there are different things you can do with cultivations, but also knowing where your enemy is on your farm and your soil type, but also where the seeds are in your soil profile as well. And all of those things will have a big effect on what you can do to try and reduce your weed burden overall and to reduce the population that comes up in your crop. And that's really what a lot of these integrated crop management or integrated weed management strategies and tactics are all around.
So, Richard, we've seen the launch of a new grassweed herbicide, Fundatis, this autumn. That's generating a lot of interest, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But as you say, integrated crop management still very much at the forefront of autumn weed control strategies. And you've been working on what's called harvest weed seed control, this idea of collecting weed seeds as they go through the combine harvester and then destroying them. Tell me about that.
So this was all started off by a farmer in Australia many years ago, and the Australians used various different tactics. So that they started off by kind of collecting all the chaff and burning all the material off the field. One tactic that's really popular in Australia is chaff tram lining. So all of the chaff is gathered into a straight line behind the combine. And in Australia, they're very lucky that they can still set fire to those lines and burn the seed, something that we haven't been able to do in the UK for many years. The one method that is sort of taking hold in various parts of the world, and the thing that we were particularly interested in, was looking at these impact mills. So these are sort of impact mills that are integrated into the combine, that the chaff fraction goes through that impact mill and it shatters all the seed within that mill. So we wanted to do a piece of work predominantly looking at blackgrass. That's still our number one weed problem in the UK. So we wanted to see how efficient or how much blackgrass seed would be left on plants leading up and going into the harvest period, particularly of winter wheat in the UK. So what we've done with other integrated weed management tactics is we've used sort of weaknesses in the ecology or the life cycle of that weed species to try and reduce that population. So one of the tactics for blackgrass is delayed drilling or spring cropping, eradicating most of the population or the seed bank before you drill. So is this a tactic that we can use for blackgrass? So we were in the unique position at Rothamsted because we've been running a BGRI, sort of blackgrass farm network, since 2014. So this covers about 70 farms across the main wheat growing area of the UK. We visit these farms each year and we map about 2 or 3 fields on each farm when those fields are in winter wheat for blackgrass abundance. So we're walking up and down the field. So this seemed like a prime opportunity to get a really good handle on how much blackgrass was on these plants leading up towards or at the time of harvest. So we've just done a paper. We've just released all this data with some colleagues from the university in one of the universities in Italy that were looking at some similar species. And we've got 8 seasons worth of data, which is fantastic data set. Unfortunately, it looks like for blackgrass, most of the seed will have shed before harvest time in winter wheat crops. So only the very, very earliest harvested winter wheat crops, the sort of the early 25%, is there really any negligible blackgrass left on sort of blackgrass plants at harvest time. So that's the kind of slightly negative. We do go and map winter barley fields. We have a few winter barley fields on the network every year, but it's only between about 5 and 10 fields. So the data set's much smaller, but the data looks like slightly more promising for winter barley. So on those, there's anywhere between 10 and 20% seed left on the plants at harvest. So that could be a target for something like this harvest wheat seed mill. But I think the populations would have to be quite high, I would say.
So it works in places like Australia and parts of Europe, but does harvest weed seed control have a place in the UK?
So the data that we've collected focus mainly on blackgrass, but we know that the agronomy that farmers are doing and the cultivations are changing the weed populations that we're finding in fields. So I say, unfortunately, on our blackgrass network, it is still blackgrass dominated. So we do have a few fields with Italian ryegrass or wild oats and some of the Broom species, but there's not enough data to really get a good handle on some of those other species. But some of those will be much, much better targets for this harvest wheat seed control. So the Italians, they did some work on Italian ryegrass and they showed under their conditions that there was about 40 to 50% of the seed left on the plants at harvest. And my guess is that would be something fairly similar in the UK, maybe 30 to 40%. I think the rye and meadow brome species could be a really, really good target. We do see more of those species on our farm network now, and they definitely hang on to their seeds much longer than the sterile or grape bromes. So I think that could be another big target. And they do seem to be increasing in numbers across our farms with sort of greater uptake of sort of direct drilling and no-till systems. Wild oats could be a target, but I think there's a lot of variation from year to year. So the Italians did some work with wild oats and they found that the really windy summers just leading up to harvest blew all of the seed out of the panicles and off the plants. So I think that might be very, very dependent on the weather in any given year up to harvest time.
That's Richard Hull from Rothamsted on harvest weed seed control, capturing weed seeds as they pass through the combine harvester and then destroying them by running them through a mill. Louise, fascinating stuff, but first let's talk about this new herbicide. Fundatis from FMC launched this autumn. Is it going to make a difference?
Well, this new herbicide, we have been waiting for it for a while. Finally, thank goodness it's been approved. So we have been waiting for this product for a while. What's interesting about it is that it is based on 2 new active ingredients that we haven't had in this weed control market before, and one of which of those and brings a new mode of action into the picture. So that's the one that is known as Isoflex. I think its chemical name is biclazone. So what we've got with this product really is further choice in pre-emergence chemistry. So it comes obviously at a time when it's really needed, because we do have resistance out there in grass weeds, and we do have existing chemistry which may not be with us for too much longer. So what this product needs to do, and what I'm sure it will do, is fit into the mixes and sequences that are used at this very early control timing. So we're really talking about pre-emergence herbicide here. I think it also can be used very early post-emergence, or certainly in wheat. But yeah, it's fitting in with the sequences that people have already got planned, and how to get the best from that. So that's going to depend, obviously, on the weed spectrum that you've got on the farm. The other really important point, I think, to make about all pre-emergence chemistry, it is the timing that gives the best results, but you do have to have cool and moist soils for them to work really well. So very dry conditions, and we'll have to wait and see what happens as we go into the autumn, are not the best for these residual soil-acting herbicides. We do need some moisture in them.
And harvest weed seed control, Louise, capturing the weed seed in the combine and then destroying it as it goes through the harvester. You heard Richard Hull there. Is it really an option in the UK?
Well, it's one of the tools that is available to growers. I think it works where everything is perfect, and that's probably the issue with it, really. Certainly, it has been effective on both rye brome and meadow brome, because both of those tend to hang on to their seed for a bit longer. But for the other weeds, it's been pretty lukewarm, I suppose. I mean, ryegrass, maybe 50% destruction of seeds. Wild oats and blackgrass, not really. So although there is a new paper and it does summarise everything quite well, I don't think we're probably really any further forward with this. You know, it's worked very well in places like Australia, but of course the crops there, they die rather than ripen. So everything is ready at the same time. So when you're harvesting, it's, weed seeds and your grain at the same time. That situation just isn't the same here. So, it does help. It stops the spread of some of these weed seeds, and it does reduce some of the seed return, but perhaps not to the level that we need it to be. But it's as you say, it's another option, and where you've got maybe very high value crops and you haven't used any herbicides on them at all for reasons that there aren't any approved or whatever, then it probably does have more of a place. But as I said, I think it's been tried and tested in this country, and it hasn't really given the results that are going to persuade people to go out and buy one of these units and have it fitted to the back of their combine.
There we go. Lots of ways of destroying weeds, some more effective than others, depending on where you are in the world and whether you're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast in the UK or indeed Australia. That is about it for this week's episode. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to the Farmers Weekly podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories in UK agriculture. But for now, I'm Johann Tasker.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast was brought to you in partnership with Tesco.